Okay. Hello. So I will present a bit our work from Sheffield. So we are the Urban Education Live Sheffield team, together with Carolyn Butterworth and Tatjana Schneider, who's supposed to be here today presenting, but I'm here instead of her. So I will today draw on our preliminary findings of ongoing research into collaborations between the university, in our case Sheffield School of Architecture, part of university, and the civic initiatives in Sheffield in the north of England. So I will a little bit introduce the context of our department, the architecture department in Sheffield, and as well as the specific Sheffield context of civic initiatives in the specific political economic context that we have in Sheffield. So in the end, I will share some interim findings of our research because we're halfway through the project, so we're still in process. The findings are from the investigations into what kind of challenges these civic initiatives are meeting in their day-to-day operation from grassroots levels. And also I will point out more for discussion or questions the points where we can meet them being a university in collaborations with them. So we as spatial practitioners in the making, how we can work with these initiatives on place-based projects around Sheffield. So first of all, to give you a context in which our research is done in our department, our department has this pretty long history and tradition of critical radical pedagogy based on reflective learning and involving communities in their work. Over the past decades, it's made a strong theoretical foundation for what we now call live pedagogy, but it can also be described in other ways. And it allows our students to go out and work with communities and other third sector civic initiatives, not just in Sheffield, but nationwide and sometimes internationally. In general, the University of Sheffield has quite a long history of civic responsibility towards its city, because it was founded actually in 1904 solely on penny donations made by the people of Sheffield, so that the children of the working class men can go to university in their town. So as you can see on the left, this was like a slogan to encourage people to donate their pennies so that Sheffield could be more competitive nationally and internationally, saying Sheffield is the only large city in England without a university. And it worked. They raised something like equivalent to today's money, like £15 million, just to build the third building, and we're still building on that heritage. And the momentum of civic university movement is now building up nationally around the UK. The government has just recently set up a civic university commission, which made a report, like Lord Kerslake says, their chair. Universities have an irreplaceable and unique role in helping their host communities thrive. And so far, 30 universities in the UK have signed this report, manifesto, and it's hopefully it will pick up with time. However, looking at what kind of projects prevail in our university and what are the showcase projects they're doing, it's mostly on an interinstitutional level. So they work with the NHS, the National Health Service, with the hospitals, and mostly advanced manufacturing. Like Boeing is the biggest investor in the mechanical engineering department of university. So there is still a lack in collaborations with grassroots organizations. So this is something we are trying to work towards in our department as much as possible. So this brings me to live projects. So working with grassroots, local civic initiatives, has been made possible through testing and exploration of various pedagogical models over the last, 20 years and more. And the interaction between the curriculum, research, and practice gradually evolved in what we call live projects. This year is the 20-year celebration in November, so there will be a lot of events around that. We've done more than 200 projects with a lot of students, and as I mentioned, they're not only based in Sheffield, it's also community organizations nationwide and also internationally. We've worked with 16 countries so far. So what is a LIFE project? It's a 6-week master level project that takes at the beginning of every academic year. The brief of the project is co-created and co-developed with a community client, and it's solely aimed at delivering something useful for the client and also useful for the students to learn interacting with an actual client out in the city. So the outcomes can be anything from, it can be design-based, it can be build-based, it can be research-based, it could be just a master plan, a feasibility study, or a website, or whatever the client and the student develop together. And this is just an illustration of some of the projects that we've been partnering specifically over the last 2 years with Urban Education Live. So over these decades, it became apparent that operating just from the city campus, the university campus, is not enough. Students and the university needs to be present in the streets with the people. So that led to opening LiveWorks, which is a space in the city center where place-based community participation can happen, and we have an open shop front so that people passing by can look in and come and tell their opinion and see what the students of architecture are doing. From that space we do teaching, mostly postgraduate and postgraduate taught students. We're doing research there at the moment with Urban Education Live, and also our PhD students work from there. We also commission some design projects with local initiatives that want to continue the collaboration of their live project, and it also functions as an urban room, which is an expression now picking up in the UK, and it was one of the founders of the Urban Room Network in the UK when it was opened in 2014. Now, for the first time within the research for Urban Education Live, we tried placing a temporary LiveWorks local hub at the community library in a local area of Sheffield, where just in March this year, the students displayed their work, their ideas about the city, and they asked people for their opinions and feedback. They were there only for 1 day, but we have more of these pop-up LiveWorks hubs planned for the next year. So moving on to the context of Sheffield civic initiatives. How am I with time? Good, okay. So obviously these civic initiatives are set in the context of Sheffield, so I will just outline a little bit the kind of political, economic situation of Sheffield. For those of you who don't know, Sheffield is in the north of England. It is a post-industrial city which has suffered a big economic and social decline in the 70s and the 80s. And it's now really finding to rebrand itself, reinvent itself. It's been branded as Sheffield City of Makers, Creative City, Digital City, and a city for like outdoorsy young professionals, because 1/3 of the Sheffield Council actually lies in the National Park Peak District, which is really beautiful. And it's also home to 2 very large universities, which at the moment are the strongest economic forces in the city. However, of course, in contrast to that, the city struggles with many social issues and a big inequality divide. There's a sharp division between the kind of disadvantaged northeast, which you can see in the red, like these are the most deprived areas of Sheffield in the northeast of the city centre, and the more in the a lot wealthier southwest part of the city, which is also geographically located near the greener national park. And there was a research report done by Sheffield Fairness Commission some years ago, which illustrated this by just taking one bus route, which goes from the southwest area all the way into the northeast. And on this bus route, as they say, a baby girl born and raised in one part of the city can expect to live almost 10 years longer than a baby girl born and raised about 4 miles away. So on this one very short journey with a bus, you can, like the average life expectancy drops 10 years, like drastically. So on top of that divide as well, the austerity and local government budget cuts hit cities in the north of England particularly hard, also in Sheffield. And because these Sheffield City Council has been forced to keep spending on local services to a minimum, a lot of these services are now provided by volunteer-based organizations and just self-initiated by local people and volunteers, such as libraries, food banks, even play spaces, things that Sheffield Council no longer afforded to take care of. And as in another report looking at cities around the UK, they said councils' traditional role as custodians of places is under big threat as a result of the austerity budget cuts. So we started our research last year by mapping these initiatives around Sheffield. It's a very bright photo, but we started with the ones that have already been involved in live projects and in other ways connected to our department, and then others emerged as the research progressed. Now they're quite dispersed around the city. So far we've mapped 160, but this list is growing every day. They're quite dispersed, but there is not as many of them. Like they're a lot less dense in the more privileged southwest area as expected, even though this has not been analyzed specifically. So for this presentation, we have selected 3 of these initiatives to focus on. One is the Israq Somali Community Organization, the other one is Pitsmoor Venture Playground, and the third one is Healy Development Trust. They've been selected because of their location. So Pitsmoor Adventure Playground is actually located in the very deprived area in the northeast of Sheffield. Israq, the Somali community organization, is here right on the edge of the city center, which is at the moment an area which is going through regeneration, but it's still quite deprived, especially in the area where the building of Israq is located. And they also represent quite a deprived community in Sheffield, which is the Somali community. And Healy Trust, it's on the edge between the deprived and privileged areas, but it's more like a patchwork of pockets of very deprived and derelict buildings and open spaces, and obviously some more like middle-class pockets as well. So it's a very interesting area of combination of both, which is not uncommon in Sheffield. All of these 3 are very well established. They've been around for more than 20 years, but even despite that, they're in constant state of precarity because the funds are not as constantly available as they used to be. For example, Israq Community Organization at the moment has no paid staff. It's run completely by volunteers. But when they started in the 1970s, they had 40 fully paid staff and were fully backed up by the Sheffield City Council. And yeah, this has changed, and they're in constant, the provision of their activities is in constant threat. Just a quick illustration of them. Israq Somali Community Organization provides different services for the Somali community, such as education, health support, any kind of sort of community building activities. And they were part of a live project a couple of years ago where students helped reimagine the building that they possess. And they're very, like I said, they're not paid, they're all volunteers, and they're very keen to do, like, we know what we've got a mission to do, we know we've got a job to do to represent our community, and that's kind of the driving force that they've got going on. Pitsmoor Adventure Playground is more than a playground, it's more like a community hub and a meeting space for children and their parents of all backgrounds and cultures. And they also know it's a bloody worthy piece of work that we're doing, but the challenges are there. And the last one is Healy Trust. it is a more like a community anchor. They provide services to a whole neighborhood. So it's not just an area. It's a whole larger space where they tackle dereliction and neglect and try to provide jobs for local people. And all of their projects are independent, not-for-profit, led by local people, and they're all about the place, trying to create a thriving whole neighborhood. Okay, now in 5 minutes I will try to condense our actual findings from the research. The challenges that have been emerging from our talking to these three organizations show that the provision of their services is under threat, and they're in this constant state of precarity. But because we have an ongoing collaboration with all three of them, we are trying to learn through these collaborations of how we can maybe make these connections better with them and try to help them at some points where they are where they're really struggling to go on. This is just a quick research methodology. As I said, we start with mapping, then we invited some of these representatives of civic initiatives to talk to us through focus groups, and then one-to-one in-depth interviews with some individuals, and now in the second, third year, we're doing that in more depth in a local area with the help of master level students. So the key reason for the precarity obviously is struggle to find funding, and after the Sheffield City Council discontinued the support, the organization started applying for short-term grants, but as Adam puts it, 3 years sounds a lot, but 3 years is just 3 years after the program is done, and if there is no replacement, you lose the program, you lose the people. This led the organizations to redefine themselves and their activities and how they operate. So they had to find new ways how to find more creative sources of income. In the case of Israq, they rent out their space. So they have 3 regulars renting out spaces: martial arts, table tennis by a Chinese guy, and a church group. So things that are not within the scope of the activities and services they used to provide, just to get some of the income and rent out the spaces. Or doing different contracted jobs to reinvest into the charity, like in Healy Trust. They work very business-like, very much about these contracts allow us to make a margin and to reinvest back into the local infrastructure and the charity. In each case, they need to redefine what they do, and they need to be much more flexible and fluid in the way they operate. There's also, of course, this faces them with a problem of lack of the skills and the knowledge that they need to redefine their operation, which adds some additional stress to them, to the people, and the work they do. Patrick from Pittsburgh says, we now have a responsibility of running the playground like a small business, and it's demanding because they've never had to do that before. Okay. And Adam, even though they have this legacy of 30 years, they are starting from scratch. So although they've been around for 30 years, again, it's trying to go back to the basics and getting it right. So where can our students meet that, and have been meeting that? So is co-created speculation the way to go? Like Andy from Healy Trust said, alternative thinking is not coming from politics, it's coming from music and arts. Maybe the university has a role to play there. As the big part of precarity is lack of continuity of staff and funding, and maybe university can understand how a vision can help to plan ahead and try to go around this short-term precarity The next challenge, which I will try to do really quickly, is trying to find the right staff that will be dedicated and stay around, and that obviously will not be paid for the hard work they put in. So when you're working in the voluntary sector, at the end of the day, it comes down to individuals. In the end, if you haven't got good people who have the right skills, it just won't work. And Andy says a lot of talented people, a lot of confident and experienced people have moved on. It's very difficult to maintain long-term linear collaborations within what they do. So they also said, with their experience with working with students from live projects, they said the biggest thing live projects brought was 12 young, optimistic, uncynical, energetic people into the heart of our organization. and all of their enthusiasm and energy and how much they loved what they were doing, somebody comes in and says, what you're doing is amazing and this is the way forward. So is the agency of the students present itself, this injection of fresh energy, the richness of idea, is that an asset that kind of gives the very well needed boost to their organization. And also we are very aware this is just a 6-week project, but bringing a long-term vision into the organization can also find ways to overcome that and find new, maybe more fluid, creative ways to find staff that would be dedicated. I have one more challenge, but I can stop there.
One sentence? In one sentence, a challenge?
In like 3 slides.
Okay. Maybe we can discuss that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.